Okay, I think we're live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This nice Tuesday morning for those of us out here on the West Coast. Totally excited to have this conversation today, and excited to have Rob Chesnut join us. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me give folks a little background on you for those folks who don't know you. So Rob most recently was the Chief Ethics Officer at Airbnb. He was prior to that General Counsel at Chegg, and prior to that he led Trust and Safety at eBay. So has a lot of time in the trenches leading how the private companies can lead an ethical path. So Rob, thank you for joining us today.
Janine, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And most recently, which I'm halfway through, Rob authored a book, Intentional Integrity, How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution, which really kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And John here is putting up a nice little book cover for Rob.
There it is.
And Rob, I'm almost done with it, but it's so, I think, really the timing is perfect for your book, because I've been thinking about these issues. So let me kind of set the stage before we kind of dive into our conversation. I mean, I keep on thinking like this is like, not only are we the 100-year pandemic, but we're the 100-year kind of society is changing, right? And it kind of makes sense if you look at the turn of the century, the late 1800s all the way up to the 1930s. Really, it was a time of like rapid change. You had economic changes, you had social changes, and here we are again, kind of experiencing all these same dynamics. We've got a racial reckoning and social kind of justice issues, and rethinking our whole criminal justice system. We've got this pandemic, and how do we chart a course, the safest course in this pandemic. We've got the gig economy, and what does that do to the whole employment relationship and workers' rights? Climate change. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, it gets a little overwhelming, and I think the big picture is we're in a time of rapid change, and I think it's just impractical to wait for government agencies to lead the way of here's the guardrails. And I think what you're suggesting in your book is, all right, well, the private sector can do that. And in a way, even with COVID, we've kind of seen the private sector take a step up and say, hey, we've got an organization, we've got a workforce to take care of. We can't wait for the government agencies to tell us what to do. We're going to figure out what to do.
I think regardless of your political philosophy, I think we could probably all agree that our trust in government and its ability to solve some of the world's biggest problems is low. And whether the private sector should lead might be one question. But I don't think there's any doubt that we need the private sector to step up and solve some of the world's biggest problems. And I think for decades, Janine, we looked at companies and said, you know what, whatever you want to do is fine as long as it's in the best interest of shareholder value. Right? If it increases the value of your stock, that's great. Problem with that theory is that the people that get enriched from this are the executives, the CEOs, because they're the ones that are paid according to the stock price going up. Right. And it really creates a dynamic where companies cut ethical corners. And worse, all in the interest of getting that quarterly stock price up. Now, that may mean you're dumping carbon into the air. It may mean that you are taking advantage of people on the other side of the world to make your goods under conditions that none of us should be proud of.
Right.
But we may be taking advantage of independent contractors in order to get big quickly. But we need better from companies. And I think now is the time to look at companies and get them to step up.
Yeah. So let's kind of start with just some nuts and bolts, Rob. So, in your book, you talk about it. Your phrase is intentional integrity. Can you just walk us through like what you mean by that? How you think about that?
Yeah. Well, integrity is often said to be, doing what's right even when no one's watching. The problem is that in today's world, everybody's always watching, and I guess they're not just watching; they're talking about it, right? Employees want to be proud of where they work. It's what's the logo on your LinkedIn profile. It becomes your life story, and you want to feel as though you're doing good in the world. Consumers want to feel like when they spend money, it's going towards something that's consistent with their values. So you've got all these things now pushing on companies where consumers are speaking up, employees are speaking up, government's putting pressure on them. So what's really interesting about this is you would think with all of the articles about bad behavior at companies and over again, brands and careers getting destroyed.
Yeah.
You would think that the companies would be putting some effort into intentionally making integrity part of their culture. Because we've actually seen that it resonates with employees. Customers are moving money toward companies that focus on having a purpose, a bigger purpose. What's surprising is that companies don't put any intentional effort toward making integrity part of what they do. It's actually very rare. What you see is a code of ethics, right? But the code of ethics is frequently, a company going online, copying someone else's code of ethics, putting their own name up top, and then emailing it out to everybody saying, check a box. Say you've read this. Well, what if you really cared about integrity? What if you really wanted to make it a part of your culture? What would you do? So intentional integrity really is about making integrity part of your strategy, part of your culture, making an effort to drive it into the way that you treat people inside of the company and the way that your company interacts with the world.
Yeah. So in your book, Robin, it's just totally resonated with everything we do here at Emtrain and how we think about it. You talk about like the need for clarity, right? So the ambiguity is really kind of the trap for people. And we know that when there's ambiguity, it's a vacuum, right? And the vacuum is going to allow kind of the worst behavior to rise to the top. And so when we think about intentional integrity, and this is just coming straight from your writing, it's about in a really deliberate way, kind of thinking through, okay, what's our norms of behavior for doing this? What's our norms of behavior for doing that? And trying to think through as many situations as possible, and then weaving it into the culture. And I think what you were describing and what sounds like what you did at Airbnb and probably other organizations as well is you kind of looked at it from almost a marketing perspective. It sounded like, and that you're trying to hit these messages from a couple different angles.
Yeah. You know what? I think that silence and ambiguity are the enemies of integrity because, in that vacuum, we are all free to interpret for ourselves what integrity means.
Right.
And science teaches us that we all view the world through our own lens, and through our own life experiences and our upbringing. And we also will look at things and shade things toward our own benefit. So if we look at a particular situation and we can, there's a one path that benefits us, we're actually quite good at rationalizing why that path is actually okay. So intentionality around integrity means that you as a company, you spell out a little bit what you mean by integrity. So let me give you an example. Let's take romance in the workplace. So many executives have gotten in trouble and made life miserable for employees by engaging in romantic relationships at work, pressuring people to have sex. Putting people in an uncomfortable position, right? If the boss asks you out, the first thing that pops into your mind is, what if I say no? Now, the old path of integrity is you've got a code of ethics that you copied from online, and the code says, don't engage in sexual harassment. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
And so what we did at Airbnb is I walked into an executive team meeting one day and said, there are so many examples with Me Too of executives using their power to get sex, and it ends up badly for the executive and the company. Let's avoid that. Why don't we pledge as an executive team, the 12 of us in the room that are responsible for running this company, that we will not engage in any romantic relationship of any kind with any employee or any vendor, even if it's quote unquote consensual. We're just not going to go there.
Right.
There was silence in the room for a minute. One person said, "Oh, Rob, we're all married or in relationships anyway." And I said, "Yeah, but based on what I read online, that doesn't stop anybody." Right. So what do you want to do? And we actually went around the room and everybody said, "I'm in." And we published it in our code of ethics that members of the executive team won't do this. Now, I don't think we broke too many hearts around the company with this, but what I think we did do is I think we sent a message that we weren't going to use our power to try to get involved in sexual relationships, that the workplace and the environment of being people being able to do their best work free from that sort of stuff was more important. And then we added two corollaries. We said, one, that if you're a manager in the company, anybody in your span of control has the same rule. You can't engage in any romantic relationship with anyone that you are managing for the same reasons.
Right.
And secondly, we said, if you don't fall into one of those two groups, and if you want to engage in something romantic, that's great. That's your business. However, we're going to have an ask out once rule. You may ask someone out one time, propose something romantic one time. If they say yes, great. If they say no, you have to drop it. Even if it's a really nice no, even if my parents are coming in from out of town or my dog's sick. Now, if the other person really does secretly pine away for you and that really their dog really was sick, they can come back and ask you out with their one shot.
Well, so I have to say I love that because it's clarity.
That's right.
Well, it's understood norms of behavior. It's like, and let's say you're the person that really is cringing because you don't want to deal. Like, oh gosh, I don't want to talk to this person. The norms of behavior. If the person accepts the norms of behavior, you only have one awkward experience, and you could make up some excuse why you can't, right. and then end of story. And then to your point, if you really are kind of interested, then it's on you.
It's on you. That's right. And I think that it's not, the workplace isn't a bar. If you're in a bar and you want to give it a shot a second time, or someone in your personal life, you want to go that direction, that's up to you and that's fine. But in a bar or in a personal relationship, somebody can walk away.
Yeah.
They don't have to deal with you anymore. But
right.
at work, this is someone's livelihood. This is their career. And they shouldn't have to leave a job just to get away from you. And look, this stuff happens. At one of our integrity talks, I do a talk with new employees about the way that we operate as a company. And a woman came up to me afterwards, and Janine, she literally had tears coming down her cheek. And I'm thinking, oh no, did I say something wrong? What did I do? And she said, no. She said, Rob, I was working at a company. It was one of the big tech companies in the Valley. And my boss kept propositioning me, and he wouldn't leave me alone. Oh. And she said, I didn't trust my company to do anything about it. I reported it. She said, I had to leave my job. She said, this is my first day at my new company. Oh. You have no idea what it means to have a leader of the company standing up in front of the group and talking about this and talking about the way that we are going to respect each other in the workplace. She said it makes all the difference in the world.
That's powerful. So as we work with a lot of companies, and we have this benchmark that we've kind of put together because, within our kind of programs, people are weighing in and kind of telling us what they think about certain issues. And what's fascinating is the companies that we work with that have put in the time, because it's an investment of time and effort. And I mean, it takes a while to think through, how are we going to conduct meetings? How are we going to have difficult conversations? How are we going to give hard feedback to people? How are we going to think about promotion? How are we going to think about career development? You think about the whole life cycle of everything you do, both, I call it in the house and outside the house, right? So business compliance is like, how are we going to treat our partners and neighbors and competitors? In the house is all the HR issues. But they all kind of have a central, kind of common denominator is, how do we do it here, right? And those organizations that we work with that have actually put in the time to think through that in a really deliberate way, they score the highest on our benchmark when the employees say our company has a really healthy workplace culture. And John, if you could just show kind of our viewers the graphic, because when we first saw it, so you'll see the lavender dots up to the right are all the healthiest companies. And those are also the ones, I think the darker color are the ones where there's well-established norms of behavior. So, I mean, those organizations have done, kind of a deliberate effort of kind of spelling out, this is how we do business here. What are the rules of the road? And then it totally correlates with that workforce's impression or perception that this is a really healthy company. So, when you look at it, it seems like it's common sense. It seems pretty obvious, but Rob, as you know, when you're in the trenches and you're in reactive mode, thank you, John. A myriad of issues. It's hard to kind of see how clearly, like, okay, this is the investment we need to make, and if we make this investment, everything kind of starts to track the right way.
Well, you're going to make an investment no matter what. The question is, are you going to do it proactively and focus on trying to avoid mistakes that other people have made? Or are you going to be lax about it up front and then deal with all the problems? I find it much more fun and positive to work on things that proactively prevent problems. We talked at Airbnb even about hugging. Can you hug somebody at work anymore? And what we found was that a lot of people are really confused about it. You ask that question, and about half the people in the room are huggers, and they say, absolutely fine. Of course you can hug someone. And then you've got another whole group of people that are like perfectly wonderful people, but like, hey, don't touch me. Right. And so how do you address that in the workplace? Look, each company can deal with it different ways. At Airbnb, we're a global company. You go to Europe and ask that question, you get one answer. You go to other parts of the world, you get the very opposite answer. So we came up with I thought, a very elegant solution that simply said, touching someone at work is an act of consent. If you're a hugger, it's on you to make sure that the huggee, welcome. Right? And you can't assume that just because you like to hug, that somebody else does as well. Because that sort of stuff can make people feel uncomfortable and lead to misunderstandings and the like. So we just a very simple rule. Touching someone is an act of consent, and it's on you as the toucher to make sure of it.
So, Rob, let's talk a little bit about what I see as the trickier issues, which I think you kind of dive into in your book, which is we've got a bunch of social issues happening today. And I just want to preface this. I had a conversation, and this was at least probably a couple of years ago, but it was with a chief compliance officer of a technology company, public technology company. And at the time, his opinion probably maybe has changed a little bit, but at that time, his opinion was, I don't want to touch any social issues with a 10-foot pole. Like, I just want people to come here, I want them to do their work, and it's not my job or my CEO's job to weigh in at all. That was probably 2 years ago. And now here we are, and we're all kind of trying to navigate as best as we can. Do we weigh in on, the gamut of issues all around us? And I think you've got an opinion on that.
Sure. Social justice, racial inequality and the like. You know what? I think in the old days, and by the way, old days can be just a few years ago.
Right.
I think the prevailing view was steer clear of controversial issues. Mm-hmm. Michael Jordan famously, said, Republicans buy shoes too. Because you're afraid that you're going to say something wrong. Today, that's not acceptable anymore. Yeah. People want to know your stand on things. Again, let's go back to what I was talking about earlier. Employees want to be proud of the place that they work. They want to feel like they're making a difference. They want their company to stand for something that's consistent with what they stand for. And customers want the same thing. Now, that means that you don't have the luxury of silence. Now, you don't have to necessarily weigh in on every social justice issue. Like Dick's Sporting Goods, for example, needed to weigh in on gun control because they sell.
Yeah.
Airbnb needed to weigh in on immigration and discrimination because Airbnb is all around belonging and about helping people who are, from different parts of the world or have very different backgrounds really connect in a meaningful way. So those are things that are directly relevant to its mission. So I think the area of racial justice touches just about all companies, right? Because all companies have employees who are Black and they have customers who are Black. So those are things that companies need to be clear about. Their leaders need to talk about what their view is on these things.
Rob, can I interrupt for a second? Would you also say, because I think the harder issue that I'm kind of watching CEOs, I think, struggle with is it's one step just to come out with a statement. It's another to actually do the hard work, both internally and externally, right? Like, what's your thought on that? Like, just because I'll just put out my view. I think we've gotten to the point where putting out a statement just becomes another kind of check the box.
Everybody does it. It's almost forced and expected. So now you got to have the follow-up question. The follow-up question is, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
What's your contribution going to be to help? And the great thing about the internet is it's beautiful when it comes to accountability. There's so much transparency around what's going on in a company, right? And if there's not transparency, believe me, the employees are going to solve that problem. They'll start posting or tweeting about it. Totally. Or they'll walk out if they don't like it. So I think it's certainly not enough just to say something. You've got to back it up with action. And the truth is, 10 years ago, there was not this level of transparency. People didn't know what was going on and people didn't talk about it. That's all out the window now.
Right. And I see it just, increasing this, in this direction. I mean, I think, our kind of attitudes have changed. I think we expect more, and the younger demographics expect more. And so here we are.
They should, and I think we'd look for so long. Too many people have, I think, suffered, and there's been too much silence about it. So, and I think, I give a lot of credit to the younger generation that's coming up now, and they want action, and they're speaking up about it powerfully. And again, that's the whole nature of the book is about this recognition that the world is changing, that it's not enough for companies just to hit a quarterly profit number. They got to change the world. They've got to speak up and solve some problems that the world's facing, and that's something that the government, employees, customers are all expecting. So leadership just got tougher. It's relatively easy just to hit a financial number. Now you got to hit a financial number, but you've also got to do it in a way that is consistent with a bigger purpose of doing good in the world.
Well, consistent with, as you and I were talking last week, consistent with the organizational mission and its values. So that, it can take kind of a leading, a leadership role, basically. I mean, I think it's probably fair to say that private sector has taken a leadership role in how we respond to this pandemic and keep our employees safe. That's one.
This is, we're the ones that have the direct contact with our employees. We're the ones that are familiar with the unique circumstances of our particular workplace. And so I think that we need to do that because I think a fundamental obligation of a company is to care for its employees. Yeah. The employees are stakeholders now, very clearly. And companies need to look through the lens of what's good for our people when they make decisions. There's that old saying, purpose, people, profits. in that order.
Yeah.
And in reality, if you want to maximize profits, you've got to inspire people with a purpose, and you've got to take care of your people. The great thing about it is it's not either or.
Right.
If you've got a strong purpose, it's actually going to drive a higher level of profits. Companies that are perceived to be acting with integrity and with greater purpose outperform the market. They outperform their competitors. It's not an either or. You don't have to choose doing the right thing or doing the thing that will make you the most money. The good news is they're consistent.
Yeah, they're totally consistent. And, what I hear you saying, kind of tying back to an earlier thought that you had, I think the market and the employees are looking for companies that have powerful brands. Maybe is the best, brand is kind of a buzzword, but it's got an emotional appeal to it, maybe is the best way to put it. And that is organizations that are so clearly focused on their purpose, and they've clarified their kind of stance and position on certain issues. And then that starts to create, a common kind of anchor or thread for the employees to know where they stand. And that helps, the whole organization be more successful in the market, I think. So it's all kind of additive.
That's right. Look at Airbnb. I don't think Airbnb is the first company to ever look at short-term rentals of places. But what I think Airbnb's done really well is it's put a higher purpose to it than just simply a transaction. Right. Airbnb is about belonging. Really, it's about helping people get connected with other human beings in different parts of the world. And I think that higher purpose inspires employees. It resonates with customers and helps build a brand that I think is a very powerful.
Yeah. And so I think just to kind of sum this up a little bit, I think by the private sector and by companies kind of proactively thinking through what are the social issues that are most relevant to their purpose and their mission, and they're helping society at large, basically, kind of helping forge the way. And then at the same time, they're helping create a more healthy, engaged workforce and a more powerful brand.
That's right. Absolutely.
Super. I was just going to make sure there was any other questions here that I had for you. Real quickly, we got maybe a couple more minutes, Rob. You had told me a story of, one issue at Airbnb where you guys were able to be ahead of the curve a little bit and kind of a proactive stance on inclusion and accessibility, and how that belonged to, kind of was very relevant to your brand. Do you want to walk us through that real quickly?
Sure. And it came out of, I think, being behind in candor. I think we were behind on recognizing discrimination on our platform. I think back in 2016, there were a number of reports of Black users who were having a tough time finding rooms on Airbnb because there were some hosts that were discriminating. And I think when we look back at it, we were surprised at that kind of discrimination. And the reason we were surprised was that we weren't very diverse inside the company. And when a lot of your leaders have never been discriminated against, it's not a high on your awareness. But after we recognized that we were behind, I think the company took some steps to become much more diverse, particularly at leadership levels. And it also got us thinking about what else are we missing. And another area I think we felt that we were not where we wanted to be was in accommodating people with physical disabilities. There were too many situations where people who were showing up in wheelchairs and the house would be marketed as handicap accessible, but it has 2 steps. And somebody would say, well, you said this was accessible. And then the host would say, well, yeah, once you get in the house, it is. So that's not acceptable. So one thing we did was we went out and we bought a small company called Accomable that was started by Sren Madapali, who's been in a wheelchair since he was very young. But started a company designed to address the needs of people who have physical handicaps but want to travel. And I think having Sren inside of Airbnb helped us really focus on building out a number of accommodations that thought through these issues and helped hosts better describe their listings so that you can match the particular listing with the needs of a particular guest.
No, so that's super helpful. So it's a nice illustration of seeing an area where you can be proactive. The silver lining of being reactive on a different issue, on a current social issue, weighing in and actually taking a leadership role. It's good for the audience. It's good for your members. It's good for the brand. It's good all around. So I think we're at the top of the hour. So Rob, I want to thank you so much. I want to summarize here. I think what Rob is talking about in his book, and the topic of our conversation today, is really how to be intentional integrity, and how smart companies can really kind of take a leadership role in ethics and paving the way. And in this, to me, I think of it as really kind of a privilege to be, in professional life at a time when there's so much change happening. It's frazzling, but it's also exciting at the same time. So I think this is a kind of a nice topic and a nice thing to think about as we move forward, navigating all these tough issues. So Rob, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you for joining us. Rob will be available, and you can kind of connect with him. We'll shoot a link to his personal website if you have any questions. And thank you for joining us, and have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.